He almost smiled when he saw her. Not because he missed her. Because he thought life had finally proven him right. The rooftop lounge floated above downtown Seattle like a glass island in the rain. Soft jazz drifted through the cold October air while city lights shimmered across wet skyscrapers below. Waiters in black carried silver trays between clusters of investors and polished strangers pretending not to stare at one another's watches. Claire Whitmore stood near the edge of the rooftop with both hands wrapped around a glass of sparkling water she had barely touched. The wind kept catching loose strands of her blonde hair, brushing them across the collar of her black dress. Simple dress. No designer label. No diamonds. Just clean lines and quiet elegance that belonged to someone who had stopped trying to impress people years ago. Then Brandon Hale appeared beside her. Expensive gray coat. Perfect smile. The same cologne that used to linger inside their tiny apartment back when they split grocery bills and dreamed about impossible futures. He looked her up and down slowly before swirling the whiskey in his glass. Claire, wow. I almost did not recognize you. His voice carried just enough amusement to make the people around them listen closer. Claire gave a polite smile. Hi, Brandon. He tilted his head slightly, eyes dropping toward her waist before lifting again. Life has been comfortable for you, huh? A few quiet laughs escaped from the cocktail table beside him. Not loud enough to sound cruel. Just soft enough to humiliate someone in public. Claire tightened her fingers around the stem of her glass until the cold pressed into her skin. The music continued. Someone laughed near the bar. Rain tapped softly against the rooftop windows behind them. And for one terrible second, she hated herself for still remembering the version of Brandon who used to kiss flour off her cheek at 2 a.m. while she baked cinnamon rolls for extra money. That man no longer existed. Brandon casually pulled out his phone while talking to another guest. Actually, I just closed on a new penthouse near the waterfront. He turned the screen outward to show photos. Modern. Kitchen. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Marble staircase. But Claire never saw the penthouse first. She saw the wallpaper. An old photo of them. 5 years ago. Before success sharpened him into someone colder. She was laughing in the picture, standing beside him in an oversized university sweatshirt, while holding a paper cup of cheap coffee. Thinner then. Younger. Happier. Brandon froze the instant he realized she had seen it. His thumb immediately darkened the screen. Too late. Something flickered across his expression before disappearing behind another practiced smile. Claire looked away first. The rooftop suddenly felt smaller. Louder. Harder to breathe inside. She stepped away from the crowd and moved toward the glass railing overlooking the city. Below her, Seattle glowed gold and silver beneath the rain. Traffic lights blurring into ribbons across the wet streets. Cold wind slipped beneath her sleeves. She lifted one hand to smooth her hair back into place, steady and composed despite the trembling beginning inside her chest. Behind the reflection in the glass, she noticed movement. A man standing near the private elevator lobby. Tall. Dark suit. One hand holding a phone against his ear. He was not speaking anymore. He was looking at her. Not at her body. Not at her dress. At her. Like he had heard every word Brandon said and hated the sound of it. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the elevator doors opened beside him with a soft golden light. The man stepped backward into the elevator without breaking eye contact completely. And just before the doors closed, Claire caught the faintest glimpse of his face. Calm. Unreadable. Dangerously attentive. Then he was gone. Claire exhaled slowly and stared at her own reflection trembling faintly against the rain-covered glass. She did not know the stranger had just heard the entire conversation. And she definitely did not know that by the end of the night, he would remember her name. Seattle rain always sounded louder after humiliation. Claire Whitmore stood beneath the awning outside the rooftop hotel, arms folded tightly against the cold wind rolling off Elliott Bay. Midnight traffic painted streaks of white and red across the soaked streets below, while guests from the reunion party disappeared one by one into black luxury cars. Nobody looked at her anymore, which somehow felt worse. Her heels rested on wet pavement beside a silver planter overflowing with rainwater. She kept replaying Brandon's voice in her head. Life has been comfortable for you, huh? Not loud. Not cruel enough to defend herself against. Just polished enough to make her feel small. She exhaled slowly and searched for her scarf before realizing she must have left it upstairs. Perfect. The wind cut through her sleeves again. Then a calm voice appeared behind her. You forgot your scarf. Claire turned immediately. The man from the rooftop reflection stood beneath the hotel lights holding a cream-colored cashmere scarf folded carefully over one hand. Rain dotted the shoulders of his dark coat, but somehow he still looked untouched by the weather around him. Closer now, she noticed details she had missed upstairs. Silver at the edge of his dark hair. Sharp blue eyes. A face composed in that dangerous kind of calm wealthy men seem to practice for years. He extended the scarf toward her. You looked cold. Claire hesitated before taking it. Thank you. Her fingers brushed the soft fabric. Warm still. As if he had been holding it for longer than necessary. For a second, neither of them moved. The city hummed behind them. A taxi splashed through rainwater at the curb. Far above, jazz music still drifted faintly from the rooftop lounge she wished she had never attended. Then his phone vibrated. The screen lit up between them before he could lower it. Julian Mercer, board chair calling. Claire's eyes flickered instinctively toward the name. Julian Mercer. Even she knew that name. Mercer Hospitality Group owned hotels across half the West Coast. Bellevue Towers. Luxury resorts. Private club celebrities pretended not to photograph. The kind of empire people discussed on business podcasts while standing in line for coffee. He noticed her reaction immediately but said nothing. Instead, he silenced the call with one smooth motion and slipped the phone back into his coat pocket. The silence shifted. Not awkward. Heavier. A gust of rain blew beneath the awning, and somewhere behind them, the hotel doors opened with warm golden light spilling across the sidewalk. Sir, the valet called carefully. Your car is waiting downstairs. Julian nodded once but did not leave. Claire suddenly became aware of how ordinary she looked standing beside him. Damp hair. Drugstore mascara. Black dress bought on clearance nearly 2 years ago. She pulled the scarf closer around her neck. I should probably go, she said quietly. At that exact moment, the elevator doors near the private lobby began closing. Julian stepped forward without hesitation and caught the door with one hand. After you. Claire blinked. You do not have to. It is raining, he said simply. Something about the way he said it made refusing feel strange. The elevator smelled faintly like cedarwood and expensive cologne. Soft amber lights reflected against polished brass walls, while the city disappeared behind closing doors. Claire stood near the corner clutching the scarf against her chest. Julian remained beside the control panel silent. Not staring. Not performing charm. Just present. The elevator stopped unexpectedly on the lobby level. A laughing couple stepped inside holding champagne glasses from the party upstairs. The woman froze almost instantly when she saw him. Oh my God, she whispered too loudly. Wait, are you Julian Mercer? Her boyfriend straightened immediately. The atmosphere changed so fast Claire could almost feel it happen physically. People did not look at Julian the way they looked at normal men. They adjusted around him. The woman nervously tucked her hair behind one ear. We loved the Mercer opening in Napa, she rushed out. It was incredible. Julian offered a polite nod. Thank you. Nothing more. No arrogance. No effort to impress them, which somehow made him seem even more powerful. Claire found herself studying him differently now. Not just because of the money, because he looked strangely disconnected from the attention surrounding him. Like someone accustomed to rooms becoming quieter the moment he entered them. The couple exited quickly on the next floor, leaving silence. Behind again. The elevator continued downward. Claire stared at the changing numbers above the doors while rainwater slid slowly from the hem of her coat onto the marble floor. Then the elevator reached the private parking level. The doors opened softly. Julian stepped out first. A sleek black car waited several feet away beneath muted garage lights while a driver stood beside the rear door holding an umbrella. Julian took 2 steps forward, then stopped. He turned back toward her. Miss Whitmore. Claire looked up immediately. A cold ripple moved through her chest. She had never told him her name. The elevator doors began sliding shut between them. How do you? Too late. The doors closed completely. And for the rest of the ride down, Claire stood alone inside the quiet elevator with her heartbeat echoing louder than the rain. Seattle smelled like espresso and rain the next morning. Claire unlocked the front door of Whitmore Cafe just after 6:30, while the streets near Pike Place Market still glistened from the storm overnight. The early fog rolled low between brick buildings, softening the city into pale gray shapes beyond the windows. Inside, the cafe felt warmer than the world outside. Fresh cinnamon, ground coffee, the quiet hum of refrigerators waking up for the day. Claire tied her apron behind her waist and tried not to think about the hotel elevator, or the way Julian Mercer had said her name. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the reflection of Brandon's old wallpaper photo, then Julian's calm face behind the elevator doors. Two versions of her life colliding in less than 12 hours. The bell above the cafe door jingled softly. Her assistant, Molly, hurried inside carrying 2 pastry boxes against her chest. "You look exhausted," Molly said immediately. Claire forced a small smile. "Good morning to you too." Molly placed the boxes on the counter and narrowed her eyes. "You went to that reunion thing last night, right? Tell me Brandon did not say anything stupid." Claire reached for coffee filters instead of answering, which was answer enough. Molly sighed quietly. "He is still awful." "Great." Claire opened her mouth to change the subject when the front door opened again. The sound alone made something tighten unexpectedly inside her chest. Julian Mercer stepped into the cafe wearing a charcoal coat darkened slightly by mist outside. No security team. No dramatic entrance. Just quiet presence. For one strange second, the entire room felt smaller. His gaze moved across the menu overhead before settling on her. 1 cinnamon latte. His voice sounded calmer in daylight. Less distant. Claire nodded automatically and moved toward the espresso machine. Then he added softly, "You still make the little leaf on top?" Her hand stopped completely. The cafe suddenly sounded too quiet. The little leaf. Years ago, when business was slow and she still believed tiny details could save hard days, Claire used to pour small latte art leaves into drinks for regular customers she liked. But Julian had never been here before. At least she did not think he had. She slowly looked up. "How did you know that?" A faint pause crossed his expression, almost invisible. "I notice things." Not an answer. Before Claire could press further, the morning rush arrived all at once. The front bell kept ringing. Construction workers, office employees, tourists escaping the cold drizzle outside. The cafe filled with overlapping voices and steaming milk and wet coats dripping onto tile floors. Claire moved quickly behind the counter while Molly rushed between tables carrying warm pastries. Then the espresso machine sputtered violently. Steam burst sideways with a sharp hiss. "Oh no," Molly muttered. The line near the register groaned impatiently. Claire crouched immediately beside the machine, fingers moving quickly across the controls. "Come on." But the pressure valve refused to reset. More customers entered. The noise grew louder. Then suddenly, a pair of hands reached beside her and steadied an overloaded tray before it could fall. Julian. Without removing his coat, he stepped behind the counter and began organizing clean cups with calm efficiency. "I can handle the register for 2 minutes," he said. Claire blinked at him. "You absolutely cannot." One corner of his mouth almost moved. "Watch me." The tension inside the cafe shifted strangely after that. Customers who recognized him straightened immediately. One businessman near the pastry display nearly dropped his phone after staring twice at Julian. Another whispered quietly to his wife, "Is that Mercer?" Within minutes, people who had been irritated suddenly became patient, polite, careful. Claire watched the transformation happen in real time. Not because Julian demanded attention, because power followed him naturally. That realization unsettled her more than she expected. Steam curled through the warm cafe air while rain tapped steadily against the windows outside. Claire finally managed to restart the espresso machine. Relief washed briefly across her face. "You saved my morning," she admitted quietly. Julian handed her a clean towel. "You were already handling it." Their fingers brushed accidentally as she took it. Warm skin against cold hands. Both of them paused. Just 1 second too long. Neither moved first. The sound of the cafe disappeared beneath the strange stillness between them. Then the front bell rang sharply again. Claire turned instinctively toward the entrance, and her stomach dropped. Brandon Hale stood in the doorway wearing a navy wool coat still dotted with rain. His eyes landed on Claire first, then slowly shifted toward Julian standing beside her behind the counter. The expression on Brandon's face changed immediately. Confusion, recognition, then something far more dangerous. Interest. The cafe suddenly felt too small for all three of them. Rain streaked slowly down the front windows while the morning crowd continued pretending not to stare. The espresso machine hissed softly behind Claire, filling the silence with bursts of steam that somehow made everything feel more tense. Brandon recovered first. "Well," he said lightly, adjusting the sleeve of his coat. "This is unexpected." His eyes stayed on Julian now. Not friendly. Calculating. Claire wiped her hands carefully on a kitchen towel before stepping back toward the register. "Can I get you something?" Brandon smiled without looking at her. "You still remember my order?" The question landed heavier than it should have. Julian remained near the counter, one hand resting loosely beside a stack of ceramic cups. Calm, patient, watching everything without appearing to. Claire kept her voice even. "Medium Americano. No sugar." Brandon finally looked at her again. There she is. Something about the familiarity in his tone made Claire uncomfortable in a way she could not explain. Not because she missed him. Because he spoke as if he still had access to parts of her life he had already abandoned. Brandon glanced around the cafe slowly. Warm wood tables. Small hanging plants near the windows. The handwritten pastry menu Claire updated every morning herself. "You always said you wanted something simple." Claire placed a cup beneath the espresso machine before answering. "Simple is not the same as small." The words settled quietly between them. Even Molly stopped wiping tables for half a second. Brandon gave a short laugh, but it sounded thinner now. Julian said nothing. Still, Claire could feel his attention shift toward her like heat near a fire. Outside, the weather darkened unexpectedly. Wind pushed harder against the windows, rattling the hanging sign above the door. Then the power went out. The entire cafe dropped into sudden silence. The espresso machine died mid-hiss. Lights vanished. Only gray Seattle rain remained visible beyond the glass. A few customers groaned softly while phones lit up across tables like scattered stars. "Oh, perfect," Molly muttered from near the pastry display. Claire exhaled and immediately moved toward the storage cabinet beneath the counter. "It happens whenever the weather turns ugly," she said calmly. "Give me 1 second." She pulled out a box of emergency candles and began lighting them one by one across the cafe. Tiny flames slowly warmed the darkness. Golden reflections flickered against the windows while rain rolled endlessly outside. Something softened in the room after that. Conversations lowered. People leaned closer together. The smell of cinnamon and coffee deepened beneath the candlelight. Julian watched Claire move through the dim cafe carrying small circles of light from table to table. No panic. No performance. Just quiet steadiness. For the first time in years, Brandon seemed uncertain around her. Claire reached the corner booth near the window and lit the final candle there. The flame illuminated one side of her face while the city blurred silver behind her. Julian could not look away. Not because she was trying to impress anyone. Because she was not. That difference unsettled him more than he expected. Claire returned behind the counter and crouched to search beneath the register for a flashlight. "Please tell me we still have batteries this time," Molly whispered. Claire almost smiled. Then her hand brushed against an old recipe box tucked near the back shelf. Worn edges. Faded blue lid. She froze for one brief second before pulling it forward. As she lifted it, something slipped loose. A Polaroid photograph fluttered onto the floor between her and Julian. Claire's breath caught immediately. Julian bent down instinctively and picked it up before Brandon could. The candlelight flickered across the glossy photo. Claire and Brandon years ago. Standing outside their first apartment in Capitol Hill. 24 years old. Broke. Smiling like the future belonged to them. Claire's stomach tightened. Some memories became painful not because they were bad. Because they were once beautiful. Julian studied the photo quietly. Not long. Just enough to understand something unspoken inside it. Then, without a word, He gently turned the photograph face down on the counter and slid it back toward her. The gesture felt strangely intimate. Protective, almost. Claire looked up at him slowly. And for the first time since meeting him, she saw something crack faintly beneath his composed expression. Not pity. Not curiosity. Something deeper. Something careful. The cafe remained wrapped in candlelight and rain while customers murmured softly around them. Then suddenly the lights flickered back on. The moment shattered instantly. Phones buzzed. Machines restarted. The world returned too quickly. Brandon stared between them now, noticing something he clearly did not like. Claire reached for the photograph again, but her fingers hesitated slightly above it. Because for reasons she did not fully understand yet, it no longer felt like the past was the only thing waiting for her inside this cafe. The rain finally stopped 3 days later. Seattle woke beneath pale autumn sunlight that spilled softly across the windows of Whitmore Cafe, warming the wooden floors in long golden rectangles. Outside, people moved slower after the storm, carrying fresh flowers from Pike Place Market and paper coffee cups between chilly gusts rolling in from the water. Inside the cafe, life returned to its ordinary rhythm. Milk steaming, plates clinking softly, Molly humming off-key beside the pastry case while arranging blueberry scones. Claire stood behind the counter frosting cinnamon rolls, trying very hard not to look toward the door every few minutes. Which was ridiculous, because Julian Mercer had no reason to come back. Men like him did not build habits around small cafes. Still, every time the bell above the entrance moved, her chest tightened before logic caught up. Okay, Molly finally said while wiping down menus. This is becoming embarrassing. Claire frowned without looking up. What is? You pretending you are not waiting for someone. I am waiting for customers. Molly laughed quietly. Sure. The bell chimed again. Claire looked up automatically. An older woman stepped carefully into the cafe instead, leaning heavily on a polished wooden cane. Her silver coat still carried droplets from the damp sidewalks outside. Claire smiled immediately. Mrs. Peterson, your usual table is free. The woman's face softened with relief. You always remember. Of course I do. Claire walked around the counter to help her remove her coat. As Mrs. Peterson settled slowly into the corner booth, her hands trembled enough to send her coffee cup tipping sideways. Dark coffee spilled across the table and onto the sleeve of the woman's cream sweater. Oh dear, she whispered, embarrassed. I am so sorry. Claire reacted instantly. It is okay. She grabbed napkins, kneeling beside the table without hesitation while carefully blotting the fabric before the stain spread. Mrs. Peterson looked mortified. You should not have to do that yourself. Claire smiled gently. You have been coming here since my 2nd month. Open. That makes you family. From near the window, Julian Mercer watched the entire interaction silently. Claire had not even noticed him enter. He sat alone at his usual table now. Same charcoal coat. Same untouched newspaper folded beside his coffee. Same calm expression that somehow made the cafe feel quieter whenever he walked in. But something in his eyes looked different today. Softer. More attentive. Claire finally stood again, brushing flour lightly from her apron. Julian spoke before she could return behind the counter. Most people only notice important people. His voice carried low through the warm cafe air. Claire glanced toward Mrs. Peterson, now smiling faintly into her tea. Then they miss almost everyone. The words settled between them gently. No performance. No flirting. Just truth. And somehow that felt more dangerous. Near the register, Molly looked back and forth between them like she was watching a scene she already understood before either of them did. Then suddenly, the television mounted near the pastry case switched from local weather to a financial news segment. Bright music filled the cafe. Seattle-based entrepreneur Julian Mercer received the National Hospitality Leadership Award last night. Claire froze. A giant photograph of Julian appeared across the screen behind the anchor. Black tuxedo. Flash cameras. Board members applauding beside him beneath crystal chandeliers. The entire cafe turned instinctively toward him. Even Mrs. Peterson blinked in surprise. Claire slowly looked from the television back to the man sitting quietly 3 tables away holding an ordinary ceramic coffee mug between his hands. No security. No arrogance. No announcement. Just Julian. Her heartbeat shifted strangely inside her chest. Because now she understood exactly how much power had been sitting quietly inside her cafe every morning. Julian noticed her expression and gave the smallest sigh. I was hoping you would not see that yet. Molly nearly choked trying not to react. Claire laughed softly before she could stop herself. Not nervous laughter. Real laughter. The sound surprised both of them. Outside, clouds rolled back over the city again. Rain began tapping lightly against the windows for the second time that afternoon. Julian stood slowly and reached for his coat. I should go before the weather gets worse. Claire glanced toward the glass doors where wind bent the trees along the sidewalk. Without thinking, she grabbed the old navy umbrella hanging beside the counter. The cafe logo had faded years ago. One side bent slightly inward. You will need this more than I do, she said. Julian stared at the umbrella for a second longer than expected. Not because it was valuable. Because nobody had handed him something ordinary with that kind of sincerity in a very long time. Carefully he accepted it. Their fingers brushed again. Warmth lingered this time. Julian looked at her as though he almost said something. Something important enough to change the air between them forever. But before the words arrived, a sleek black town car pulled silently against the curb outside. The driver stepped out immediately with another umbrella in hand. Reality returned all at once. Julian glanced once toward the waiting car, then back at Claire. And for the first time since she met him, she saw hesitation in his eyes. The envelope arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Heavy cream paper. Gold trim. Claire noticed it immediately among supplier invoices and coffee delivery receipts stacked beside the register. Outside, Seattle drifted beneath another slow autumn rain. Water slid down the cafe windows in silver lines while customers escaped the weather with warm drinks and damp coats. Inside the cafe, soft acoustic music played low enough to almost disappear beneath conversation. Molly grabbed the envelope first. Oh my God! Claire barely looked up from frosting cupcakes. What? Molly turned the envelope over dramatically. Claire. This is from Mercer Hospitality Group. That made her stop. Just for a second. The gold seal caught the warm cafe lights as Molly slid the invitation free. You have officially entered rich people territory, Molly whispered. Claire took the card carefully. The paper itself felt expensive. Everything about Julian's world probably did. Her eyes moved slowly across the elegant lettering. Claire Whitmore is cordially invited to attend the Mercer Foundation Autumn Gala. Bellevue Grand Ballroom. Saturday evening. Formal attire required. At the bottom sat Julian Mercer's signature. Simple. Sharp. Personal. Something tightened unexpectedly in her chest. Molly was already smiling too hard. You are going. Claire folded the invitation closed immediately. No, Claire. No, Molly stared at her across the counter. Do you understand how insane this is? People spend thousands trying to get invited to those events. Claire placed the envelope beside the register like it might burn her if she held it too long. People like him do not invite people like me. Molly crossed her arms. Claire, he owns half the skyline. Claire gave a small humorless laugh. Exactly. The cafe suddenly felt quieter after that. Outside, wind bent rain sideways across the street while headlights blurred through the storm. Claire tried returning to work. Tried focusing on measuring flour. On inventory numbers. On ordinary things. But the envelope remained in her peripheral vision like a question she could not answer. Part of her wanted to throw it away. The other part kept remembering Julian standing in candlelight holding an old umbrella like it mattered. Near closing time, Molly left for a supply run, leaving Claire alone inside the cafe. Rain hammered harder now. The city beyond the windows turned gray and distorted beneath the storm. Claire finally grabbed the envelope again. She stared at Julian's signature for several long seconds before reaching for her coat. If she returned it now, maybe everything would become simple again. No confusion. No dangerous expectations. No pretending she belonged anywhere near his world. The bell above the cafe door suddenly rang before she could move. Julian walked inside carrying the navy umbrella she had given him. Still folded carefully. Still dry. As though he had protected it more than himself. Claire froze beside the counter. He noticed the invitation immediately in her hands. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rain crashed against the windows behind him hard enough to shake the glass. Finally, Claire held the envelope out toward him. I cannot accept this. Julian stepped closer slowly. Why? She laughed softly under her breath. Because this is your world, not mine. His gaze did not leave hers. You decided that very quickly. Claire looked away first. The pressure in the room felt unbearable suddenly. You own hotels, people like me save up 6 months to visit one time. That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this. The words came out sharper than she intended. Silence filled the café immediately afterward. Rain. Distant thunder. The hum of refrigerators behind the counter. Claire swallowed hard before speaking again, quieter this time. I think powerful men enjoy fixing women they pity. The sentence landed between them like shattered glass. Julian did not react immediately, which somehow made it worse. His expression remained calm, but something shifted behind his eyes. Not anger. Something more personal. More wounded. Claire instantly regretted saying it, but pride kept her still. Julian lowered his gaze briefly before setting the umbrella carefully beside the register. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed his car keys on the counter with a soft metallic sound. For one strange second it looked like he might leave without another word. Instead he stopped near the door. Rainwater shimmered across the dark glass behind him. Then he turned back toward her. Claire. I never looked at you and saw someone broken. His voice stayed low. Steady. Dangerously sincere. Before she could answer, he opened the door and disappeared into the storm outside. The bell above the entrance echoed softly after him. Claire stood motionless long after the door closed. Then finally, slowly, she picked up the invitation again. Something had changed. Not around her. Inside her. As she opened the envelope once more, a folded handwritten note slipped free and landed softly against the counter. Her breath caught, because she knew immediately the note had not been there before. The handwritten note contained only one sentence. You belong in every room where people are kind. No signature. No explanation. But Claire knew exactly who wrote it. She read the line 3 times that night while rain tapped softly against her apartment windows above the café. Somewhere below, the city still moved through wet streets and glowing traffic lights. But her world had narrowed into one impossible question. Why did Julian Mercer care? By Saturday evening, she still did not have an answer. The Bellevue Grand Ballroom rose above the waterfront like something carved from light itself. Crystal chandeliers glimmered behind 30-foot glass windows while luxury cars lined the entrance beneath rows of gold lanterns flickering against the cold night air. Claire stood outside for nearly 30 seconds before stepping in. Her black gown was simple. No designer name. No dramatic jewelry. Just soft satin and quiet confidence she was still trying to believe belonged to her. The ballroom swallowed her whole the moment she entered. Live violins drifted through the air. Champagne glasses sparkled beneath chandelier light. Women in silver gowns moved across polished marble floors while investors, politicians, and executives laughed beneath enormous arrangements of white orchids. Claire suddenly felt painfully aware of every ordinary part of herself. The hostess smiled politely after checking her invitation. This way, Miss Whitmore. Claire followed carefully through the crowd, trying not to look overwhelmed. Then she heard a familiar voice. Well, this is surprising. Her stomach tightened instantly. Brandon Hale approached from near the bar with a blonde woman on his arm wearing a diamond bracelet that caught the ballroom lights every time she moved. Brandon looked Claire over slowly. Not cruel this time. Worse. Amused. Did not expect you to survive in a room like this. The woman beside him smiled awkwardly into her champagne glass, clearly unsure whether to laugh. Claire kept her expression calm even while heat crept into her chest. I am doing fine so far. Brandon leaned slightly closer. You know, these people can smell insecurity immediately. Before Claire could answer, another voice entered the moment like a blade sliding quietly across silk. Then you have underestimated her twice. Everything around them seemed to pause. Claire turned slowly. Julian stood several feet behind her beneath the chandelier light, wearing a black tuxedo sharp enough to make the entire room feel suddenly quieter. Brandon straightened immediately. The blonde woman nearly stopped breathing. And Claire forgot how to speak for one dangerous second. Julian's attention stayed completely on her. Not the crowd. Not Brandon. Only her. Then, without hurry, he stepped forward and extended one hand. The orchestra shifted into a slower piece somewhere across the ballroom. Dance with me. Claire looked around instinctively at the hundreds of people moving through the room. I do not belong here. Julian lowered his voice just enough for only her to hear. You are the calmest thing in this room. The words hit harder than they should have. Because nobody had ever described her that way before. Not Brandon. Not even herself. Claire hesitated only one breath longer before placing her hand in his. Warm fingers closed gently around hers. The ballroom floor reflected gold beneath crystal light, as Julian guided her into the center of the room. The violins softened while couples moved around them in slow, elegant circles. Claire could feel eyes following them everywhere. Executives whispered. Board members nodded respectfully toward Julian as he passed. Women glanced toward her with open curiosity now. But Julian never seemed distracted by any of it. His attention remained steady and impossibly calm. Relax, he said quietly. Claire laughed under her breath. You say that like this is normal for me. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. It should be. The music carried them slowly across the ballroom, while Seattle glittered black and silver beyond towering windows overlooking the water. Then Claire noticed something changing around them. One by one, powerful investors began approaching Julian with immediate respect. Hands extended. Voices lowered. A senator interrupted his own conversation to greet him personally. Two hotel executives near the dance floor nearly stepped aside the moment Julian looked in their direction. Claire suddenly understood the scale of his world completely. Not wealth. Influence. The kind that altered rooms the moment he entered them. And somehow, tonight, he had chosen to stand beside her publicly. That realization hit harder than the ballroom lights or expensive gowns or Brandon's stunned expression across the room. Because through